Hello, my name is Radzikowska. I work as Kanban trainer at the J Anderson School of Management, and I'm going to answer the most popular Kanban questions. Sometimes we get asked, if you cannot move your items on the Kanban board backwards, how should you deal with defects? And the answer is all about how you design your process. But let me give you one example of how it can be handled. So let's imagine we have our ticket on the board, which is user story. And this user story went through the whole process of, say, analysis, development, design, and now it's in testing. The testing is our dominant activity on this user story, which means that right now we are focusing mostly on testing this item, trying to figure out whether it's working properly or not. And over the course of testing, we have found a defect. And this defect has to be solved by developers. So instead of moving this item back to development, we create a blocker. So we add a blocker to this user story. We block it in our process. It doesn't have to be red or pink stick. It can be an indicator. It can be any decorator on your sticker. So you block this one in your testing, and you create another work item, which is a defect. So this user story with blocker stay in testing, and you put the defect at the beginning of your process. And this defect now goes through its own process. It can be either the same process as user story or different, but it goes through the process. It's being solved by developers, maybe it requires some analysis or additional design, and it goes through the process until they meet, which means the defect is solved. When defect is solved, you close the defect, you remove the blocker, and you move on with this user story. And this is it. This is how you can design it. What are the advantages of this situation? First of all, you keep your user story where it belongs. So the dominant activity for this user story was testing. We don't move it back, which would mean that testing has never happened and now we are still in development. You avoid all of these problems which are related to moving item backwards. So basically breaking your work in progress limits, messing up your metrics, ruining your flow, or unlearning what you have learned already. But what is additional here? By recognizing that you have a defect and user story, you also recognize and realize that you have two different work item types, which can be treated differently by you. So sometimes you sequence defects as the first thing to be done, which may also have different lead times, because if this defect is prioritized, if you treat it more urgently than other items in your process, then the lead time for this defect will be shorter. So having separate user story and the defect makes your process more clear and helps you to better understand the lead time, also helps you to plan better. Because you know that if your defect appears in the backlog, now the lead time for this defect is, say, 5 to 10 days or 1 to 3 days, compared to user story, which may take you up to 20 days. And what is more, when you have a user story which is blocked because of the defects, now you have the full story behind this item. So you understand why this user story lead time was longer than the other user stories, because it was related to defect. And now you can try to design your process, if possible, to avoid these defects that appeared.